roads and bridges and medicine and all sorts of really great things. But when I look around me, and maybe it's particularly prominent in the news at the moment, I don't really see a world where rational thought and logic is kind of framing how we behave and think at the moment. And that's because human beings are complicated. So we're a bundle of habits that has been formed by our previous actions. And much of what drives us is below our level of consciousness. We often, in fact, usually perhaps, don't really know why we do what we do, why we like what we like and dislike some other things, why we're driven, where we're driven by these emotions. And often our emotions are driven by this whole kind of bundle of views that we've picked up, often unconscious, they're unthought through, and we pick them up from our upbringing and the culture that we're in. And we often haven't had much, we haven't thought them through. And you could call those views spells, magic spells, because they cast an enchantment over us. They cause us to see the world through the lens of that spell, and therefore to create the world in that way. So the generous person casts a spell of generosity, where they receive a lot of generosity back, because they see the world as a generous and giving place. And the stingy person casts a spell of lack, because they see the world as mean and threatening, and so they create that world that is mean and threatening. So they are casting that spell. So you could say that the way that we approach the world, we are casting a spell on it. And I guess that most of us may think, in fact, I think this, I can see that other people are pretty irrational. I can see that perhaps like at the moment, there's some Americans seem pretty irrational to me, really driven by their emotions and their views. And I can see that the people who have different political views from me, they seem pretty emotional and driven by wrong views. But actually, I'm pretty sussed. Do you know what I mean? I'm pretty rational. I'm not particularly affected by all these other things, and I kind of really know how things are. And I found that the path of practice through more awareness of what's going on, meditation, just bringing to mind what I'm actually thinking and feeling has been a bit humbling. In fact, very humbling, because I find out that I too am just this like whirling mixture of habits. I'm driven by how I feel about something. It's based on views that I've picked up and I've never challenged. So actually, I do a lot of things driven by this kind of, I feel like I should. And I haven't thought it through. And then afterwards, I sometimes justify it in certain ways. So that's kind of like come more and more into my consciousness. And when we are enlightened, we won't have views. We'll experience reality as it is. But until that time, what we need to do is find out what our wrong views are and change them for right views. That's what the Buddha said. So we're looking for a day when we don't have any views, but for now we need to replace our wrong views by right views. So we need to break the spells that enchant us now that aren't helpful and replace them with some good spells. We need the good fairy to cast some spells on us that is positive magic, that's more skillful and helps us towards moving towards having no views at all. So that's what we're exploring today, some good spells that we can maybe cast on ourselves that through the 4 tantric rites, these rituals, these spells. And as I said yesterday in the introduction, the Tantric Buddhism is very much a direct encounter with reality, a direct encounter with our body, with how we're really feeling. It's uncontrived and natural. It's an immediate response. And of course, what we're often feeling is quite strong emotion. So the Tantra takes that strong emotion and transforms it into something that's going to help us to cast some positive spells. So I'm just briefly going to tell the story of Padmasambhava, who is very much kind of embodies this tantric approach. And it's really interesting because Padmasambhava is a being who is both a myth. There are stories about him that aren't kind of believable in rational terms. And he was real. He was a real figure as well. So I like the fact that he holds both of these. And my wonderful technical support is about to give me a picture of Padmasambhava. Yay. So there's Padmasambhava. So you can see that he is quite a character. He's not your normal nice looking smiley Buddha. He's kind of full of a certain magical energy, and he's got streaming long black hair, all those robes, holding a trident on which there are heads in various different forms of decomposition. So a lot you could say about Padmasambhava, but I'm just going to briefly tell the classic story that we tell a lot in Triratna, which is how he transformed the demons of Tibet. So the story goes that, and I think there is some reality in this, that the king of Tibet wanted to reintroduce Buddhism back into Tibet. It had died out. And he called, first of all, somebody who was like a really renowned scholar to come. And the renowned scholar did lots and lots of good work, but just really started to build a monastery. That's what the king wanted. Let's build a monastery. And they found a site for that. And every day, a whole team of people would go out and dig to build the foundations for the monastery. But then at night time, the nagas from the lake, the monsters, the spirits, the demons would come out and they would take down the day's work. So they were getting nowhere. So the scholar said, what we need to do is we need to call on Padmasambhava. He's got like a really amazing reputation. He's kind of spent a lot of time living in cremation grounds. He hangs out with all sorts of demons. He's very powerful. He is the guy that we need. So after a while, after a long time, Padmasambhava did come. And what he started by doing is touring the Tibet and getting in touch with the demons that lived in Tibet. And sometimes he'd be quite forceful and sometimes not so forceful. But basically what he did, he would find a really scary monster living up in the mountains somewhere. And he would find out the monster's secret name. So he'd find out what the monster was called, the demon was called. And then calling that monster by that name, that demon by that name, he would give that demon a particular important job to do. So basically the way that he would deal with the demons is find them, perhaps use force to overcome them at first, but then find their secret name and give them something very precious to do. And because he was able to work with the demons, Padmasambhava was able to come meet the king of the Nagas. These are these kind of dragon-like figures who live in the lake near where they're building the monastery, transform their energies so that they would come out at night to build the monastery. And in the end, the monastery was built. And there's many, many more stories like that. So if you haven't really had a chance to come across Padmasambhava before, he's a great figure to explore. And I suppose it's very obvious what the meaning of that story is. It's a bit like we can work hard during the day at being ethical, meditating, etc. And then during the night, our unconscious forces will come out and take it all apart. And it's not until we actually communicate directly with those unconscious forms that we can transform them and get them on our side. So Padmasambhava are very much associated with the Tantra and with these, with transforming demons. And these 4 tantric rites, I suppose we could say, are about transforming different demons that we have. And they come from village magic. So they come from the kind of magic that I imagine most people in the world, actually ever, that have lived, have believed in. Because it's only in the last 100 years or so that the kind of scientific method has become what we encouraged to believe in. Most people would believe in spirits, and in using magic, calling on a shaman or a witch to work with those spirits. And the first one we're going to look at is the red rite, which is the rite of fascination. So each of these rites have a color that is associated with them. So here we have a red rose, the rose of love. And red is such a powerful color, isn't it? Associated very much with love, with passion, perhaps with craving and with lust as well. So red is the color of my true love, and red is the color of this rite of fascination. So in the village tradition, the you would do love magic because you would want to perhaps really like fall for somebody and think, I'd really like to lure them. I'd like to fascinate them. I'd like them to think that I'm fascinating and that they get obsessed with me. And you would ask somebody to make a magic potion, or you do some kind of a ritual to kind of lure them so that they fell in love with you. I don't think it was always straightforward. There's loads of stories, aren't there, about people who did that and it all went badly wrong. But anyway, that is basically the idea behind it, that you're ensnaring someone and drawing them to you. And I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because love, lust, craving in particular, such a strong emotion, and an emotion that as good Buddhists, we might think is not one that we want to be particularly pursuing. Obviously, craving is there in the Four Noble Truths. Like suffering comes from craving. But what we're talking about here is how to transform that incredibly strong wish for love, to love, into something positive that we can use in our practice. I suppose for me, I know that like having praise and being loved is quite a strong motivation for me. And I think that if I can access that emotion, I can use that in my practice, which I'll talk a bit more later. So fascination. So you could say that the Buddha himself was a very fascinating person from the stories that we hear. A bit like a magician, when people met the Buddha, they would often go, wow, what an amazing, beautiful man this is. They would be transfixed by him. He would probably actually have been pretty kind of thin. He was just living off begging. He would have been probably unshaven. He wearing ragged robes, maybe dusty from walking on the road, but still they saw him as very beautiful. There was a glow, there was an atmosphere, there was something about this man that really drew people in. And actually he was accused of using magic spells to lure young people away from their families. And of course he wasn't in the sense we're talking about where he cast a spell. It was more that people actually were affected by more than just his words and teachings. They were affected by his very being. And that fascination that people had with the Buddha at that time is something that it's really helpful for us to develop in our practice. Because if we love something, we're going to want to do it. If we love somebody, we want to spend time with them. If we really are fascinated by something, we really want to explore it. I mean, we'll all have had experiences of that. We probably have also had experiences of when we have fallen in love with a person and we'll basically do anything to be with them. You know, people will move continents, they'll get up incredibly early in the morning to talk to them on the phone, they'll give up their families and their lives to be with that person that fascinates them. And if we want to use that energy in our Dharma practice, we need to find what is it in our Dharma lives that gives us a similar feeling. So for some people, it will be meditation. It will just be that joy of breathing in and out, or the joy of feeling metta for somebody else. For some people, it will be perhaps study. I think that's particularly what drew me in, was just the wonderful feeling of being in a study group talking about the Dharma and something else arising from that, how wonderful that was. It could be ritual. It could be, it could be ritual, it could be mantra. So something in your practice, it could be friendship, connections with other people, the Sangha, something that draws you in. And I think there's something about when you feel that, noticing it and going with it, really increasing that. So that's the first thing that comes out of this red rite that I'm going to talk about today, is that we need to look for what fascinates us in the Dharma if we really want to practice. Because then we're going to want to do it. It's not going to be a chore. It's going to be, I really want to go to my study group because I love it when we talk about the Dharma together, for instance. And the second red rite, which I mentioned yesterday, is the Metta Bhavana, which is the most radical love magic there is. So just loving people for themselves, learning, the fact that we can learn to love, that really blew me away the first time I heard it, that we could actually develop the capacity to love other people if we put our minds and our hearts to it, is fantastic. And I think really important for many of us in that when we start the Metta Bhavana and in our spiritual life is that first stage of Metta, which is loving ourselves. I'm sure Maichidasa tomorrow will talk more about loving other people, but it's so difficult sometimes, isn't it, to bring a sense of kindness and love to ourselves when we make a mistake. You probably might have seen that just before we started, I just kicked over a cup of coffee, and Vicky had to clear it all up. And I think I have come some way, because I think once I would have really told myself off for that. But now I just go, oh, well, I'm thinking about a lot of things, about to give a talk. No wonder I just wasn't very mindful of the coffee and kicked it over. I didn't tell myself off, which I'm really pleased about, actually. Because when we do not bring metta to ourselves, we don't bring kindness to ourselves, and we punish ourselves, it really doesn't help. It really doesn't help. And we may well have spent a lot of our lives trying that out and found that it doesn't work. So my experience is that when I can bring kindness and metta to myself and cherish myself, that allows me to cherish other beings, actually, in a very straightforward way that's not involved with craving. And I think in a community, if we can be living in that situation where we are cherishing ourselves and cherishing others, it's a very beautiful thing. It is very attractive, actually. It is a fascinating thing to be with people when they are bringing metta to themselves and to others. And I guess I'll just say this little bit about my experience with praise. So I do love it when people praise me. And I guess I find that I can crave it. I can really crave it. And I guess in a way, I've tried to put that wish to be praised into something which is quite helpful to other people. So to serve other people, and to no longer hopefully expect praise or crave it in the same way. But I'm not explaining this very well, but it's a way that it kind of I've transformed that wish into serving others, basically. Yeah. Okay, so that was the red rite of fascination. And now we're moving on to the white rite, which is the rite of pacification. And I guess these should go up in the chat box actually as well at the end, yeah. So I've chosen, in fact, Vicky chose this very beautiful picture of snow, a snowy mountain, and mist as well. And if you did get up for the meditation this morning, you might have seen how misty it was outside. And there's something very peaceful about that mist. So for me, this idea of the white as the color of pacification is that feeling, if you were in this scenery, if you came out of your chalet and you looked out and everything is so quiet and so peaceful, so calm, covered by snow. So that's the feeling that's going on here. And in village magic, this rite of pacification is calming down those turbulent forces, those ghosts that scare us at night, that haunt the village at night, how we pacify those ghosts, how we create peace and calm. So what are the ghosts for us that disturb our sleep? What are our demons? So for me, it's often anxiety, actually. So one is anxiety. And recently, probably like most of us, I've been having a little bit extra anxiety thrown in, particularly when some of the regulations change. So because every time the regulations change, we have to change something at the center, I found myself kind of like when we went into when there was a tier 2, then there was a tier 3, and then very quickly we were in this lockdown. And every time there was an announcement made, I could feel anxiety, quite strong anxiety in my body. And as a result of that, actually, I could feel this kind of frenetic energy and a kind of a wish to blame a few people, something to blame myself or blame some other people. There's something to do with that energy. But I realized that what was going on was that actually a kind of very ancient part of myself, I think, if we're talking biological terms, it'd be that part of my brain which has evolved to find out when things are about to attack me. So it was particularly triggered by having those announcements of all the changes. And it would go into this high level of kind of arousal, of awakeness, of looking, where is this danger? What should I do about it? And of course, It's so difficult for us at the moment because the danger seems to be kind of quite unknown in a way. And it's like very hard to know what we can do to stop it apart from staying in, I suppose. So it's like we can't do what our bodies want us to do, which is run away or fight the danger. All we can do is try and sort of stay in and look after ourselves and others. I think that's real, and it's so unknown as well what's going to happen. So that's really difficult for human beings to be with. But once I realized that it was that part of me that was triggered, this kind of part of me, I just did quite a lot of soothing work with that part of me, just kind of going, well, look, doing a bit of mindfulness, bringing my awareness into my feet, what was going on right now, right here, what could I control and what couldn't I control? So I guess I was meeting the kind of spell of fear and anxiety that this demon was giving me with a much more kind of a spell of pacification. It is okay right now. You are okay. Things are okay in your experience right now. And if things stop being okay, it will still be fine. You'll manage to deal with it, actually. So that was my rite of pacification in that particular situation. And it's interesting that when Padmasambhava pacifies demons, he finds out the secret name of the demon and what it needs and gives it something to look after. So in a way, part of that is I'm going, yes, thank you, ancient part of my brain, lizard part of my brain, for spotting the anxiety, for the threat. That's really helpful. But right now, actually, everything is okay. And you're doing a really good job, which is looking out for anxiety. And I can tell you now that you're doing fine with that job and everything is okay. So it's not like fighting the demon. It's not like kind of going, go away anxiety. It's kind of going, right now, we don't need to have it. But I do appreciate the fact that you're there looking out for me, because it's really helpful. Like if I'm crossing the road and a huge lorry is coming towards me, I would really like that anxiety demon to wake up pretty fast and get me going. So it's kind of like when it's appropriate and when it's not appropriate. Okay, so now we're going to go to the black rite of destruction. Okay, so this is where when it comes from the village rite of when we don't like somebody really, or they've got something that we want, like we want their field or their sheep or something like that, and we will use force to get it. We will put hex on our enemies. We will curse our enemies and wish them disaster. Yeah, perhaps we want them to die even. So it's a very strong emotion, a very human emotion, actually, and a difficult emotion as well. So I guess we have to ask ourselves, what are our real enemies at the moment? What are our real enemies? So I guess our enemies, when it comes right down to it, I think, are those mental states of anger, greed, our ignorance about how things really are, and the other poisons, those difficult mental states like envy, jealousy, neurotic craving, neurotic anxiety. They are actually our enemies, because there's what disturbs us mostly. And they're what is at the heart of everything in the world that is not going so well, I would say. And what's interesting about all those enemies within us is that they are, as the phrase goes, they're mind-forged manacles. We've made them ourselves. We don't have to have them. And if we want to be free, if we want to be liberated, we need to break those manacles. And this is where this rite comes in. This is where putting that real energy into that kind of destruction of what gets in our way. So my experience is that I've never been able to just do this once. Some people do. I think some people have a different kind of mental makeup from me. They'll say to me, oh, I saw that X and now I've completely changed. And I wish that was and that's great. For me, it doesn't work like that. It has to be again and again and again that I work on something. And I find that when times are hard, those things will come back actually, but hopefully not as strong as they were before. So for me, this rite of destruction is not just once, it's again and again. But I think maybe the strength of the will of destruction is the wish to get rid of something. So an example for me is a few years ago, I really was having a bad time with ill will. It was making my life really unpleasant. And this phrase came to me that I think is from the Black Panthers, actually, which was by any means necessary. And I just thought, I cannot bear this ill will anymore and how it's ruling my mental states and affecting other people. And I will do whatever is necessary to get rid of it. And what I did was a whole range of things. I practiced in some particular ways. I connected archetypal images like Amitabha of love and compassion. I started some therapy, which looked at my childhood conditioning, which had led to me feeling like that about other people. I looked at my conditions I was living in and actually started exercising more. So it was a bit like there was loads of forces I put in there. But what behind it, which is the force of destruction, was just no, I cannot bear this anymore. And for me, it was ill will. I can imagine for other people, well, for me in the past, it might be, like addictions we have, like smoking or something like that. It might be certain ways we behave, we think, we just say, no, we don't want to do it anymore. I just want to mention as well something from Sangharakshita I find really helpful in this connection, which is in this context, which is the power mode and the love mode. So, Sangharakshita talks about, so the love mode comes from metta, and the power mode obviously comes from wanting to have power over somebody else, or if you do have authority, inflicting power on somebody else. And sometimes we might behave in ways that from the outside look like the power mode. So if a child touches a hot stove, we might just pull their hand back. So we'll dominate them. We'll use our force to do that. But actually it's coming from the love mode because we don't want them to hurt themselves. So I think the love mode that looks like the power mode might be part of this force of destruction. This kind of I had that image of the sword because it's something very strong about that. Yeah. Okay, and now we're going to move on to the yellow rite. Yeah, lovely sunflowers. This is the rite of prospering. So in a village, this is the rite of fertility. So it's making all the crops grow, the animals healthy, children healthy, fertility. And I'm going to say two things about this. So first of all, is that, I did grow some sunflowers this year, and I couldn't make them grow. What I could do was set up the conditions for them to grow. We do say this a lot at the Buddhist Center, but it's because it's true. We can't often make things happen, but we can affect the conditions. So for sunflowers, I did need to get a seed. I needed to plant it, water it, give it some nutrition in the soil. It grew into a little seedling, and then I planted it in the ground. And then, in fact, if you come to the community garden, you can see them, they're still there. Now they're huge. They're huge. It's amazing what came out of this little seed. But I didn't do anything to make that happen. It was the conditions of the right sunlight, water, and nutrition that made that happen. And that's the same for us when we want to prosper. We can't will ourselves to happiness, really, or to being freer, or to being kinder, or to being more in touch with reality. But what we can do is set up the conditions for that. And actually, us all being on retreat, even though we're doing it on Zoom and things aren't easy, that is a condition for us to prosper, for our spiritual life to prosper. So we're putting those conditions into place. And many of the things that we do on retreat are the things that help us to prosper. They are things like meditating regularly, having a bit of time outside, maybe this afternoon, connecting with friends, studying the Dharma. Yeah, lots of things. So you will have your own knowledge of what is the magic spell of prospering that you can bring to yourself. What are your magic spells that help you to prosper? And the second thing with prospering, is actually we have a pretty good harvest already, and we should celebrate that. It is the kind of time of year, maybe a bit late now, but where we do have the harvest festival. And there's something about really celebrating the harvest we already have is a very powerful spell. So I talk a lot about gratitude, and that's because it's been a really strong practice for me, and it's one I still do every day, is I write down what I'm grateful for. Because I think that trains my mind, which is naturally set to look for what's dangerous in the world or what's difficult. It trains it to look for what's going well. And it's just wonderful every day when I write down all the things that I really appreciate in the day. It really changes my state of mind. So gratitude. So we can be grateful for many things here. We can be grateful for the magic of Zoom. that brings us all together. We can be grateful to Vicky, who is on tech, who stood in at the very last minute, actually. Yeah, I hope you saw that, Vicky. You got a few things. We can be very grateful that we have found the Dharma, if that works for us. We can be grateful that we have this fantastic Sangha. We can be grateful that Sangharakshita put together the Dharma in a way that works for us. We can be grateful to the Buddha. There are many things that we can be grateful for in whatever our situation is. And I guess for me, what I can just be really, really grateful for is that actually, however hard it is, because I have the Dharma to practice, I can always do something with whatever happens. If you see what I mean, whatever happens is an opportunity to grow more. So celebrating what we already have, that is that fourth magic spell. Okay, so I'm going to just come to an end. So what happens if we do practice our magic spells of fascination, of pacification, of destruction, and of prospering? Well, mythically, what we become is a darkini, a sky dancer. A sky dancer is a female figure who dances in the sky. And here is a very kind of Tibetan picture of one. So she is, she's free of any limitations. She's naked mostly because she has nothing to hide. And she dances on the poisons, what gets in our way. She's actually trampling various figures under feet, but they are the figures, the barriers to enlightenment. So, so the darkinis are very much associated with the Tantra, dancing free in the sky, liberated from the bonds of self-obsession, from the bonds of wrong views, from evil magic and evil spells. And that's what we can do too, is we can dance in the sky.